The history of the exact origins of world religions is often shrouded in mystery, and the subject of how much value holy books and texts have as historical documents has been a fierce academic battleground for historians for centuries. Islam, as the most recent global religion in the world, was considered to be the exemption of this rule, with the 19th century French scholar Ernest Renan claiming that it was born in the light of history. For centuries, it has been assumed that the Quran, Hadith, Sirah, and other religious texts of Islam reflected the historical reality of the foundation and development of this religion. This persisted until 1970, when a movement spearheaded by the American historian John Wandsworth began casting doubt on the historicity of Islam religious texts, a movement which came to be known as the Revisionist School of Islamic Studies. This movement was questioned by a vast array of commonly accepted beliefs ranging from Islam's place of origin to the historicity of the Prophet Muhammad. In this video, we explore these alternative theories on the beginning of Islam, reimagining our fundamental understanding of the origins of the Muslim faith, from its place of origin in the desert of the Arabia to the life and times of its founding prophet. To properly contextualize the theories we will discuss today, we must first retrace the traditionalist historiographic view of Islam. According to Islam's holy text, Islam was founded by its prophet Muhammad, a man from the Qurayshi clan of Arabia. Islamic tradition says that Muhammad received his first divine revelation when he was 40 and started preaching a belief in the single God in the pagan city of Mecca. He was persecuted for this and was forced to emigrate together with his disciples to Medina. There, Muhammad managed to establish a Muslim community known as the Ummah and eventually returned to Mecca. Muhammad died in 632, and soon after his death, his successor standardized the Quran as we know it today. Muhammad was succeeded by the Rashidun Caliphate, the four successful caliphs chosen by the Muslim Ummah to lead the Muslim world. However, the legitimacy of this succession was challenged by Shia Muslims. During this period, the Muslim Caliphate significantly expanded its territories, reaching its apex during the Umayyad dynasty. The Umayyad dynasty brought an end to the Rashidun Caliphate when Muayyad, the first Umayyad Caliphate, transferred power to his sons, essentially turning the Caliphate into a monarchy. According to the traditionalist view, Islam had become a fully formed religion during the Prophet's lifetime and immediately after his death. According to Prophet Holland, all the fundamental teachings of Islam had been established before Muhammad's death, and the source material tends to give the impression that Muhammad and his companions brought forth Islam complete, and that later scholars merely confided and interpreted it. As such, the Quran, the Sirah or biography of Muhammad, and other interpretations of the religion, such as the Hadith and the later Muslim writers like Al-Tabari, became accepted as the key sources of understanding the period of the foundation of Islam. For a long time, this narrative was completely accepted by academia. However, in the 1970s, several scholars started questioning the historicity of Islamic scripture, and in so doing, launched the Revisionist School of Islamic Studies. While the views of the revisionary scholars sometimes clash with each other, they agree that the Quran, Sirah, and Hadith should be viewed not as historical sources, but as literal sources and as John Wandsworth puts it, salvation history. Indeed, revisionists believe that these Islamic texts, which were confided sometimes after the life and death of the Prophet Muhammad, were heavily influenced by the political realities and power dynamics of their respective periods. The main point of the contention brought up by the revisionists is the 120-year time gap between Muhammad's death and the first Islamic written sources about his life and the emergence of Islam. Indeed, there are no surviving written sources from before the second half of the 8th century describing the events that led to the foundation of Islam in detail. While external sources from the 7th century mention the emergence of a new religion and a prophet, they do so only superficially. Another issue often pointed out by the revisionists is the contradiction between Muslim accounts of the history of Islam and Muhammad's biographies. The same events or stories are described inconsistently. For instance, Patricia Crone, a prominent revisionist, notes that Muslim sources present the same purported encounter of Muhammad with non-Muslim in 15 different ways. Another example is the story of Muhammad's souls being cleansed. The common theme here is that the prophet's belly was opened by some beings who claimed his soul was evil. The details of this story differ widely between different Muslim sources, varying from the nature of the beings, ranging from angels to eagles, the number of beings who did this, and the number of people who witnessed the events. To be fair, it is rather strange that the revisionist historians analyze this story in the context of inconsistent reports, since it is clearly an example of hagiography and a religious passage. Many would argue that this story is meant to be taken allegorically, not literally. From a historical and academic point of view, it does not really matter that there are any inconsistencies in the religious story. Perhaps the most controversial theory posed by the Revisionist School of Islamic Studies was developed by Patricia Crone Krohn and her colleague Michael Cook. He puts into question the land in which Islam originated. While Muslim and traditionalist historians believe that the Arabian cities of Mecca and Medina were the place of origin of Islam, the aforementioned skeptics present a different methodology, relying on available foreign historical and linguistic data along with archaeological evidence. The revisionists refuse to base their scholarship solely on Arabic sources and on sources that make up the Islamic tradition, believing that non-Muslim sources who wrote about Islam during the time of religious founding provide a better understanding of the early history of Islam. In the work called The Agarism, Krohn and Cook argue that Islam originated as a Jewish messianic movement of Arab warriors and Palestinian Jews led by Muhammad. The evidence of this comes from a Greek Christian source, the Doctrine Lacobi, which was written during the Arab conquest of Syria between 632 and 634. Doctrine Lacobi talks about a false prophet appearing among the Saracens with a sword and chariot. This source tells the story of the Byzantine commander being killed by Saracen and how Jews were overjoyed by this. Assuming this prophet was probably Muhammad, a Greek writer referred to this movement as the Hagarenists, descendants of Hagar, Abraham's wife, and Margarita, or emigrants, a term strikingly similar to the Arabic term Muharijirum, which referred to the earliest Muslim community who emigrated from Mecca and Medina under the leadership of Muhammad. Krohn and Cook argued that after a successful conquest of Palestine under the command of Muhammad, the Arabs gradually broke their alliance with the Jews in fear of being assimilated by them. Instead, they borrowed heavily from Christianity and Judaism to forge a separate religious identity for themselves. Islam, to that end, the Arabs accepted Jesus as the Messiah. They designated Muhammad as a figure similar to Moses on the way to creating their own version of an Abrahamic religion. The authors claim that Islam gained its current form under the Umayyad dynasty, when the Arab control over the Holy Land was solidified and entrenched. Talks. Islam did not originate in Arabia, but in the Levant several generations after the Prophet Muhammad's death. This theory is problematic for several reasons. First, it completely ignores Arab sources and relies on foreign sources, ignoring the fact that non-Arab sources about Islam can be just as biased as Arab sources. Second, even though the Doctrina Lacobi mentions a false prophet, it does not specifically name Muhammad. The traditionalist approach argues that the Islamic conquest of the Levant took place under the first Caliph, Abu Bakr, and the military command of Khalid ibn al-Walid. So, it is possible that contemporary Christian sources simply confuse the commander of the army coming from Arabia with the prophet of a religion coming from Arabia. Third, Jews being happy about the killing of the Byzantine commander does not prove that early Muslims and Jews were allies. Perhaps the Byzantine commander was a common enemy. Perhaps, like many other Christian commanders in history, he oppressed Jews and they were pleased to see him killed by another group, which was unrelated to them. It is difficult to be sure if it is clear that this narrative is based on major and incomplete evidence. Even John Wansbrough, the founder of the Revisionist School, criticized this work based on the selective use of hostile sources. So what do you think? Let us know in the comments below, and while you're at it, check out some of these other videos from our channel.